The small town of Maplewood was known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and close-knit community. Life there moved at a slow pace, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and children played freely in their front yards. For Sarah Miller, it had been a peaceful existence, until the day her world came crashing down. Her son, Ethan, was an energetic 8-year-old, with a mop of curly hair and a laugh that could light up any room. He loved school, his friends, and spending time outdoors exploring the woods behind their house. But on a chilly October afternoon 2 years ago, Ethan disappeared without a trace. It was just another ordinary day when Sarah kissed Ethan goodbye before he boarded the school bus. She waved as the yellow vehicle drove off, never imagining that this would be the last normal moment she'd share with her son. At recess, Ethan and his classmates were playing tag on the playground. The teacher, on duty, had briefly turned her attention away to help another child tie their shoelaces. When she looked back, Ethan was gone. Panic set in immediately. Teachers searched the entire school grounds, calling out his name, but there was no sign of him. By the time the principal contacted Sarah, her heart was already pounding with dread. Sarah rushed to the school, her mind racing with questions. Where could Ethan have gone? Had he wandered off somewhere? Was he hurt? The staff assured her they were doing everything possible to find him, but as hours turned into days, the situation grew more desperate. Flyers with Ethan's picture were plastered all over town, on lamp posts, store windows, and community bulletin boards. Local news stations broadcast appeals for information, and volunteers organized search parties to comb through nearby parks, forests, and even abandoned buildings. Despite these efforts, Ethan seemed to have vanished into thin air. Detectives worked tirelessly, interviewing witnesses and reviewing security footage from the school and surrounding areas. They questioned strangers passing through town, checked train stations, and even followed up on tips from neighboring counties. Each lead brought a flicker of hope, only to fizzle out into disappointment. Sarah spent sleepless nights staring at Ethan's photo, wondering if she'd ever see his smiling face again. Friends and family tried to comfort her, but nothing could ease the ache in her chest. Every knock on the door or ring of the phone sent her rushing, hoping it might be news about Ethan, but it never was. As weeks stretched into months, life in Maplewood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. People stopped talking about Ethan as much, assuming the worst had happened. But Sarah refused to give up. She attended support groups for families of missing persons, clinging to stories of miraculous reunions. She kept Ethan's room exactly as he'd left it, changing nothing. Not the unmade bed, not the pile of toys in the corner. To her, it felt like keeping his memory alive, a way of holding on to the hope that one day he'd walk through the door and everything would go back to normal. But hope wasn't enough to fill the void left by Ethan's absence. Sarah struggled to focus on work, often zoning out during meetings or forgetting important deadlines. Her once bright smile faded, replaced by a constant look of worry. Nights were the hardest. She'd lie awake, replaying every detail of the day Ethan went missing, wondering if there was something she could have done differently. Maybe she should have walked him to school instead of letting him take the bus. Maybe she should have warned him about talking to strangers. The guilt gnawed at her relentlessly, making it hard to breathe some days. Despite the pain, Sarah found ways to channel her grief into action. She joined local organizations dedicated to finding missing children, attending fundraisers and awareness campaigns. She spoke at schools about stranger danger and the importance of staying safe. Though it didn't bring Ethan back, it gave her a sense of purpose, a reason to keep going when everything inside her wanted to collapse. Still, there were moments when she allowed herself to break down, crying until her throat burned and her eyes swelled shut. Those private breakdowns became her release valve, a necessary part of coping with the unbearable weight of uncertainty. 2 years passed, and though Sarah tried to rebuild her life, Ethan's disappearance remained a gaping wound. Birthdays, holidays, and milestones came and went, each one a reminder of what she'd lost. On the 2nd anniversary of his disappearance, Sarah sat alone in her living room staring at a collage of Ethan's photos on the wall. She traced her fingers over his face, whispering, Where are you? It was then that a thought struck her, a glimmer of an idea so unexpected it made her sit up straight. What if technology held the key to finding him? Earlier that week, Sarah had seen a viral post online about how people used Google Maps to locate hidden trails or forgotten places. At first, she dismissed it as irrelevant to her situation, but now, curiosity tugged at her. She opened her laptop and typed Maplewood Elementary School into the search bar. As the satellite image loaded, she zoomed in on the familiar layout of the school grounds. Then, almost accidentally, she noticed something strange. A faint trail cutting through the dense cluster of trees near the edge of the property. It wasn't marked on any official map, nor had she ever heard anyone mention it. Her pulse quickened as she leaned closer to the screen, studying the path intently. Could this be significant, Sarah wondered. She remembered hearing rumors about homeless individuals camping in the woods around Maplewood, though she'd never paid much attention to them. Now, the possibility that someone, or something, might be hiding in those trees filled her with both fear and determination. She decided to investigate further, knowing deep down that she couldn't ignore this discovery. Grabbing her phone, a flashlight, and a bottle of water, she told herself it was probably nothing. But what if it wasn't? What if this trail led her to Ethan? Driving to the school under the cover of darkness felt surreal. Sarah parked her car near the edge of the woods, her hands trembling as she stepped out. The air was cool and damp, carrying the earthy scent of fallen leaves. Taking a deep breath, she began walking along the narrow trail, pushing aside branches and navigating uneven terrain. Every sound, the rustling of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, made her jump. Yet she pressed on, driven by a mother's instinct that refused to let her turn back. After 20 minutes of trudging through the forest, Sarah emerged into a small clearing. Her flashlight beam swept across the area, revealing something that made her heart stop. There, partially buried in a pile of leaves, was an old rusted bicycle. Its blue frame stood out starkly against the natural surroundings. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she approached it cautiously. Kneeling down, she brushed away dirt and debris, uncovering a nameplate on the frame. Her hands trembled as she read the engraved letters, Ethan. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized this wasn't a coincidence. It was her son's bike, the one he used to ride to school every day. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sarah sat back on her heels, trying to process what she'd found. How had Ethan's bike ended up here, and where was he now? Scanning the clearing, she spotted a makeshift shelter tucked beneath the trees. Built from scraps of wood and tattered tarps, it looked crude but functional. Drawing strength from sheer determination, Sarah approached the structure and peeked inside. What she saw next sent chills down her spine, remnants of clothing, empty cans of food, and even a child-sized backpack. Someone had been living here, surviving in isolation for who knows how long. Though the shelter appeared abandoned, Sarah knew she couldn't leave without answers. She snapped pictures of everything with her phone, documenting the scene for the authorities. As she stood there, her mind raced with possibilities. Could Ethan have survived out here on his own? Or had someone else been caring for him? One thing was certain. This discovery changed everything. With shaking hands, Sarah called the police, her voice cracking as she explained what she'd found. Officers arrived within the hour, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they combed the area for clues. Evidence bags were filled with items from the shelter, and investigators promised to follow up on every lead. Back at home, Sarah paced her living room, her thoughts consumed by what lay ahead. The wait for answers felt excruciating, each minute stretching into eternity. Finally, days later, the police contacted her with groundbreaking news. DNA samples collected from the shelter matched Ethan's records. Surveillance footage from the school confirmed that a transient man had lured Ethan into the woods, intending to care for him, but ultimately abandoning him when the responsibility became too great. Against all odds, Ethan had survived, relying on instincts and resourcefulness to endure 2 harrowing years alone. When Sarah finally reunited with her son, now 10 years old, the moment was bittersweet. Ethan hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "I knew you'd come." Their journey toward healing was only beginning, but for the first time in 2 years, Sarah felt a glimmer of peace. Through resilience, love, and a stroke of technological luck, their family was whole again. Sarah's discovery of the faint trail on Google Maps had ignited a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. For 2 long, agonizing years, she had lived in a haze of grief and uncertainty, haunted by questions that seemed impossible to answer. But now, staring at her laptop screen, she couldn't shake the feeling that this hidden path might lead her closer to Ethan. The thought consumed her, refusing to let her rest until she followed it through. She knew the odds were slim. How likely was it that this random trail would have anything to do with her son? Yet, something deep inside told her not to ignore it. The next day, Sarah woke up earlier than usual, her mind racing with plans. She rehearsed what she would say if someone asked why she was venturing into the woods alone. Truthfully, she didn't even know how to explain it herself. All she knew was that she needed to see where the trail led. After getting dressed in sturdy boots and grabbing essentials like a flashlight, water bottle, and snacks, she drove to the school. As she parked near the edge of the property, her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and began walking toward the trees. Pushing aside branches and stepping over roots, Sarah moved cautiously along the narrow trail. The forest was eerily quiet, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or chirping of birds. Her flashlight beam cut through the dim light, revealing twists and turns that seemed to stretch endlessly. Every step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by both fear and anticipation. What if she found nothing? Worse still, what if she stumbled upon something she wasn't prepared to face? These thoughts swirled in her mind, but she forced herself to keep moving forward. After about 20 minutes of navigating the uneven terrain, Sarah entered a small clearing bathed in soft moonlight. At first glance, there didn't seem to be anything unusual, just a patch of grass surrounded by towering trees. But as her flashlight scanned the area, something glinted in the distance. Squinting, she walked closer and gasped when she realized what it was: an old rusted bicycle lying half buried in a pile of leaves. Its blue frame looked familiar, though it was covered in dirt and scratches. Kneeling beside it, Sarah brushed away debris with trembling hands. Then she saw it, a nameplate on the frame engraved with the word Ethan. Tears blurred her vision as reality hit her like a tidal wave. This was Ethan's bike, the one he used to ride proudly every morning before heading to school. How had it ended up here? And more importantly, where was Ethan now? Overwhelmed with emotion, Sarah sat back on her heels, trying to steady her breathing. Her mind raced with possibilities. Had Ethan been brought here against his will? Or had he somehow managed to escape danger and left the bike behind? Whatever the case, this discovery confirmed one thing. Ethan had been here at some point. That knowledge gave her a renewed sense of purpose. As she wiped her tears, Sarah noticed something else in the clearing: a makeshift shelter tucked beneath the trees. It was constructed from scraps of wood, tarp, and other discarded materials. From the outside, it looked crude and temporary, almost like something built by someone desperate for survival. Cautiously, she approached the structure, her flashlight illuminating its interior. Inside, she found remnants of clothing, empty cans of food, and even a child-sized backpack. The sight sent chills down her spine. Someone had been living here, and, judging by the size of the items, it was likely a child. Sarah's mind reeled as she processed the implications. Could Ethan have survived out here on his own? If so, how had he managed without anyone noticing? The idea was almost too much to comprehend, yet everything pointed to the possibility that her son had somehow endured life in these woods for 2 years. Trembling, she snapped pictures of the shelter and its contents with her phone, knowing she'd need evidence to show the authorities. Part of her wanted to call the police immediately, but another part urged her to search further, hoping to find some definitive proof of Ethan's presence. Leaving the shelter, Sarah continued exploring the clearing, searching for any additional Clues. She examined the ground carefully, looking for footprints or signs of recent activity. Though the area appeared abandoned, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her. Every rustle of leaves made her jump, and every shadow seemed darker than it should be. Still, she pressed on, driven by a mother's relentless determination to uncover the truth. Eventually, as dawn began breaking through the trees, Sarah decided it was time to leave. She couldn't stay in the woods forever, and she needed to report her findings to the police as soon as possible. Making her way back to the trail, she retraced her steps, her mind replaying every detail of what she'd seen. By the time she reached her car, exhaustion and adrenaline battled for dominance within her. She called the police on her drive home, her voice trembling as she explained what she'd discovered. Officers assured her they'd investigate thoroughly, promising to send a team to the site right away. When Sarah returned home, she collapsed onto the couch, her body drained but her mind buzzing with questions. What would happen next? Would the police find concrete evidence linking Ethan to the shelter? And if they did, where was he now? She spent hours pacing the house, unable to sit still or focus on anything else. Friends and family tried to comfort her, reminding her that this was a significant breakthrough after 2 years of dead ends. But Sarah couldn't relax. Not until she had answers. Days passed in a blur of waiting and anticipation. Investigators combed through the clearing, collecting DNA samples from the shelter and analyzing the items Sarah had photographed. They reviewed surveillance footage from the school again, piecing together timelines and connections. Meanwhile, Sarah threw herself into researching survival skills, wondering how Ethan could have lasted so long in the wilderness. She read articles about children who had overcome extreme circumstances, drawing strength from their stories. Each new piece of information fueled her determination to bring her son home. Finally, the police contacted Sarah with groundbreaking news. DNA samples collected from the shelter matched Ethan's records, confirming beyond doubt that he had been there. Surveillance footage revealed that a transient man, identified as a drifter who frequented the area, had lured Ethan into the woods on the day he disappeared. According to the man's confession, he initially intended to care for Ethan, but abandoned him after realizing the challenges of raising a child. Left to fend for himself, Ethan had somehow adapted, using the shelter and scavenging supplies to survive. Hearing this news was bittersweet for Sarah. On one hand, she was overjoyed to know Ethan was alive. On the other hand, the thought of her young son enduring such hardship alone broke her heart all over again. But despite the pain, she clung to hope. The authorities launched a fresh search effort determined to locate Ethan based on the new evidence. Volunteers joined in, scouring nearby areas and spreading awareness about the case. Social media campaigns gained traction, with people across the country sharing Ethan's story and offering support. For Sarah, the days leading up to Ethan's rescue were a mix of anxiety and optimism. She alternated between crying fits and bursts of energy, preparing her home for his return. She cleaned his room, bought new clothes, and stocked the pantry with his favorite foods. Friends helped decorate the house with welcome home banners, turning the somber space into a beacon of hope. Through it all, Sarah whispered prayers begging for a miracle, and then, one fateful afternoon, the miracle arrived. Police officers called Sarah with the news she'd waited 2 years to hear. Ethan had been found. He was safe, though malnourished and traumatized, and being treated at a nearby hospital. Sarah rushed to his side, her legs weak with relief and joy. When she finally saw him, her little boy, now 10 years old, she broke down completely. Ethan hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "I knew you'd come." In that moment, Sarah realized that no matter how far apart they had been, their bond remained unbreakable. Their journey toward healing was just beginning, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in a brighter future. Sarah's discovery in the woods had set off a chain reaction of events that would change her life forever. The makeshift shelter, the remnants of clothing, and Ethan's rusted bicycle all pointed to one undeniable conclusion. Ethan had been there. Though the evidence was overwhelming, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Relief washed over her knowing that her son had survived, but it was quickly overshadowed by guilt and fear. How could she have missed this for 2 years? What kind of hardships had Ethan endured alone in those woods, and most importantly, where was he now? The police arrived at the clearing within hours of Sarah's call, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they carefully examined the scene. Officers cordoned off the area, treating it like a crime scene, while forensic experts collected DNA samples from the shelter and surrounding debris. Every item, clothes, cans, the backpack, was meticulously bagged and labeled. Sarah watched from a distance, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, unable to tear her eyes away from the activity unfolding before her. It felt surreal, like she was living in a nightmare that had suddenly turned into a glimmer of hope. As dawn broke, the investigators began piecing together what might have happened. They traced the trail Sarah had followed, noting its remoteness and how well hidden it was from public view. One officer remarked that it was almost as if someone had deliberately chosen this spot to stay out of sight. This observation sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Was Ethan hiding because he was scared? Or had someone forced him to live here against his will? These questions gnawed at her relentlessly, making it impossible to think about anything else. Back at the station, detectives worked tirelessly to analyze the evidence. DNA samples were sent to a lab for testing, and surveillance footage from the school was reviewed once again with fresh eyes. Meanwhile, Sarah returned home, her mind racing with possibilities. She replayed every detail of the night in her head. The bike, the shelter, the clues that hinted at Ethan's survival. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of Ethan's face, imagined scenarios of what he might be going through right now. Her heart ached with longing and worry. Days passed in a blur of waiting and anticipation. Sarah tried to keep herself busy, cleaning Ethan's room, cooking meals, and organizing his belongings. But no matter how hard she worked, her thoughts always circled back to him. Friends and family visited frequently, offering words of encouragement and support. "You're so close," they told her. "This is the breakthrough you've been waiting for." While their optimism helped lift her spirits temporarily, Sarah couldn't shake the nagging fear that something might still go wrong. After 2 years of false leads and disappointments, trusting in a happy ending felt like stepping onto thin ice. Finally, the police called with news that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. The DNA samples collected from the shelter matched Ethan's records. There was no doubt it was him. Investigators also uncovered critical information from the school's surveillance footage. On the day Ethan disappeared, a transient man, later identified as a drifter named Carl Grayson, had been seen lurking near the playground. Footage showed him luring Ethan into the woods with promises of adventure. According to Grayson's confession, he initially planned to care for Ethan but soon realized the responsibility was too much for him. Overwhelmed and unprepared, he abandoned the boy deep in the forest, assuming Ethan would find his way back to civilization. Hearing this confession filled Sarah with a mix of anger and sorrow. Anger toward Grayson for putting her son in such danger, and sorrow for the unimaginable ordeal Ethan must have faced. Left alone in the wilderness, an 8-year-old boy had somehow managed to survive for 2 years. The thought was both astonishing and heartbreaking. Sarah wondered how Ethan had coped, how he found food, shelter, and the strength to carry on day after day. She read articles about survival instincts and resilience, marveling at the human capacity to adapt even in the harshest conditions. Yet none of it eased the ache in her chest when she thought about her little boy enduring all of it without her. With the new evidence in hand, authorities launched an intensive search operation to locate Ethan. Teams of officers, volunteers, and K-9 units scoured the woods and surrounding areas, following every lead and clue. Flyers with Ethan's updated description were distributed widely, and social media campaigns gained traction, spreading his story across the country. People from all walks of life joined the effort, sharing posts, donating supplies, and offering prayers. For the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of unity and purpose, a community coming together to bring her son home. While the search continued, Sarah prepared for Ethan's return. She cleaned his room until it sparkled, replacing old toys with new ones and hanging up posters of superheroes he loved. She stocked the pantry with his favorite foods, peanut butter sandwiches, chocolate chip cookies, and orange juice, and bought clothes in his current size. Friends helped decorate the house with colorful banners that read, "Welcome home, Ethan." The entire neighborhood buzzed with excitement, eager to celebrate the long-awaited reunion. But behind the preparations, Sarah wrestled with uncertainty. What would Ethan be like after 2 years in the wild? Would he recognize her? Would he remember their life together before he went missing? These questions haunted her, keeping her awake at night. She practiced what she would say to him, rehearsing words of love and reassurance. "I'm here now," she whispered to herself. "We'll get through this together." Then, one fateful afternoon, the phone rang. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked it up, bracing herself for whatever news awaited her. The voice on the other end belonged to Detective Harris, who spoke with a tone of cautious optimism. "Ms. Miller," he said, "we've found Ethan. He's safe and being treated at Maplewood General Hospital." The world seemed to stop spinning as Sarah absorbed the words. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. After 2 years of searching, praying, and hoping, her son was finally within reach. Rushing to the hospital, Sarah's mind raced with images of Ethan. She pictured him as he was before, bright-eyed, full of laughter, and always eager to explore. But reality hit her the moment she stepped into his room. Ethan sat on the bed, thinner and taller than she remembered, his curly hair tangled and his face marked by scratches and dirt. His eyes widened when he saw her, and for a brief second, Sarah feared he wouldn't remember her. Then, breaking into a run, Ethan threw himself into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom," he choked out, "I knew you'd come." Sarah held him tightly, her tears soaking into his shirt as she kissed the top of his head. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the years of pain, not the unanswered questions, not the challenges ahead. All that mattered was that her son was alive and he was home. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, clinging to each other as if afraid to let go. When they finally pulled apart, Ethan looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes and whispered, "I missed you so much." Over the next few days, Sarah learned more about Ethan's incredible journey. Doctors explained that he had survived by scavenging food from nearby trash bins, drinking water from streams, and using the shelter to protect himself from the elements. His resourcefulness amazed everyone who heard his story. Though malnourished and physically weak, Ethan's spirit remained unbroken. He spoke fondly of moments when animals befriended him, or when kind strangers unknowingly left behind items he could use. Hearing these details filled Sarah with pride and admiration for her son's resilience, but it also deepened her resolve to help him heal. Reuniting with Ethan wasn't the end of their journey. It was only the beginning. Sarah enrolled him in therapy to address the trauma he had experienced and worked closely with educators to ease his transition back into school. Neighbors rallied around them, organizing fundraisers and providing emotional support. Slowly but surely, life began to resemble some semblance of normalcy. Ethan started smiling again, laughing at jokes, and rediscovering the joys of childhood. Watching him recover gave Sarah a renewed sense of purpose, reminding her that love and perseverance could overcome even the darkest of times. Looking back, Sarah realized that finding Ethan was more than just solving a mystery. It was a testament to the power of hope and determination. 2 years of anguish had taught her to cherish every moment, to never take anything for granted. As she tucked Ethan into bed one evening, listening to his steady breathing, she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Against all odds, her family was whole again. And though scars remained, they served as reminders of the strength it took to endure and triumph over adversity. The days following Ethan's discovery were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. After 2 years of searching, hoping, and fearing the worst, she finally had her son back. Yet, as joyful as their reunion was, it came with its own set of challenges. Ethan had endured unimaginable hardships alone in the woods, and the toll it had taken on him was evident in every aspect of his behavior. He was physically weak, malnourished, and covered in scars from scratches and insect bites. But what worried Sarah most were the emotional wounds, those hidden cracks that couldn't be seen but ran deep within her son's heart. At first, Ethan clung to Sarah like a lifeline, unwilling to let her out of his sight. Whether she was cooking, dinner, folding laundry, or simply sitting on the couch, he stayed close by as if afraid she might disappear again. His eyes followed her constantly, wide with a mixture of fear and relief. At night he refused to sleep alone, curling up beside her in bed and gripping her hand tightly. These moments broke Sarah's heart but also filled her with gratitude. She understood that Ethan's neediness stemmed from trauma, and she vowed to be patient, no matter how difficult it became. Doctors at Maplewood General Hospital worked tirelessly to address Ethan's physical health. They treated infections caused by untreated cuts and scrapes, administered vitamins to combat malnutrition, and monitored his recovery closely. Over time, Ethan began to regain strength, though his appetite remained inconsistent. Some days he devoured meals eagerly, other days he pushed food away, claiming he wasn't hungry. Sarah learned to accept these fluctuations, knowing they were part of the healing process. What concerned her more were the nights when Ethan woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, reliving memories of his time in the woods. To help Ethan cope with his trauma, Sarah enrolled him in therapy sessions with Dr. Laura Simmons, a child psychologist specializing in cases involving missing children. During their first meeting, Ethan sat silently, clutching a stuffed bear Sarah had brought for him. Dr. Simmons spoke softly, asking gentle questions about his experiences. At first, Ethan hesitated, shaking his head or staring at the floor. But gradually, with encouragement from both Dr. Simmons and Sarah, he began opening up. He described how he survived by scavenging food from trash cans near the edge of town, drinking water from streams, and using leaves and branches to stay warm during cold nights. One story stood out, the day he discovered the makeshift shelter in the clearing. According to Ethan, it had already been there when he stumbled upon it, abandoned by someone else who had once called it home. Desperate for protection from rain and wind, he moved in, adding scraps of wood and tarp to make it sturdier. Inside, he found old clothes and canned goods left behind by previous occupants. Though frightened and lonely, Ethan adapted quickly, relying on instincts he didn't realize he possessed. "I just did what I had to do," he told Dr. Simmons, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought about Mom every day. I knew she'd find me." Ethan's words brought tears to Sarah's eyes, reinforcing her determination to support him through this difficult phase. Therapy sessions became a regular part of their routine, helping Ethan process his feelings and rebuild trust in others. Dr. Simmons also encouraged creative outlets like drawing and journaling, which allowed Ethan to express himself without pressure. One evening, while flipping through his sketchbook, Sarah found drawings of animals, a deer, a squirrel, and even a fox, all labeled with names like Rusty and Buddy. When she asked Ethan about them, he explained that these creatures had kept him company during his time in the woods. "They weren't scared of me," he said with a small smile. "Sometimes they'd come really close, like they knew I needed friends." As weeks turned into months, Ethan slowly began to adjust to life outside the forest. Sarah took baby steps, introducing him to familiar routines and activities. They visited the park together, where Ethan marveled at swings and slides he hadn't seen in years. On weekends, they baked cookies in the kitchen, filling the house with sweet aromas that masked the lingering sadness. Friends and neighbors stopped by frequently, bringing gifts and sharing stories to remind Ethan of the community that loved him. Though he remained cautious around strangers, he warmed up to those who showed kindness and patience. School proved to be another challenge. After 2 years away, Ethan struggled to catch up academically. Simple tasks like reading and writing felt overwhelming, leaving him frustrated and discouraged. Sarah worked closely with teachers to create a personalized learning plan, ensuring Ethan wouldn't feel pressured to keep pace with classmates. Tutoring sessions helped bridge the gap, and over time, Ethan regained confidence in his abilities. He particularly enjoyed art class, where he could lose himself in colors and shapes without worrying about right or wrong answers. Despite progress, there were setbacks. Some nights, Ethan would wake up crying, unable to shake off nightmares about being lost or chased. Other times, loud noises or sudden movements triggered panic attacks, sending him into fits of trembling and hyperventilation. Through it all, Sarah remained steadfast, reminding herself that healing wasn't linear. She celebrated small victories: a full night's sleep, a completed homework assignment, a genuine laugh, and held Ethan close during moments of despair. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, forged not only by love, but by resilience and shared pain. One afternoon, as Sarah and Ethan walked through the woods behind their house, something unexpected happened. For the first time since his return, Ethan pointed out landmarks he remembered from his time in the wilderness. "That tree," he said, gesturing toward a tall oak, "was my hiding spot when it rained." A little further ahead, he stopped near a stream, crouching down to touch the water. "This is where I drank when I got thirsty." Sarah listened intently, marveling at her son's resourcefulness and courage. Though the memories still carried traces of fear, Ethan seemed to view them differently now, as proof of his strength, rather than reminders of his suffering. By the end of the year, Ethan had transformed in ways Sarah never thought possible. Physically, he looked healthier, his cheeks rosy and his energy levels high. Emotionally, he was beginning to heal, finding joy in simple pleasures and reconnecting with the world around him. He started making new friends at school, joining clubs, and participating in sports. Teachers praised his determination and creativity, noting how far he'd come in such a short time. Even Dr. Simmons remarked on his progress, saying, "Ethan's journey is a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity." For Sarah, watching Ethan thrive was bittersweet. Every milestone reminded her of the years they had lost, yet it also reinforced her belief in the power of hope and perseverance. She often reflected on the events that led to Ethan's rescue: the trail on Google Maps, the rusted bicycle, the makeshift shelter, and marveled at how fate had intervened when she least expected it. If she hadn't followed that faint path in the woods, would Ethan still be missing? The question haunted her occasionally, but she chose to focus on gratitude instead. On Ethan's 10th birthday, Sarah threw a party to celebrate not only his life, but also his incredible survival story. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered in their backyard, decorating it with balloons, streamers, and a banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Hero." Ethan beamed with pride as guests showered him with hugs, gifts, and well wishes. During cake cutting, Sarah raised a toast, her voice choked with emotion. "To Ethan," she said, "the bravest boy I know. You've taught us all what it means to fight against impossible odds. We're so proud of you." As fireworks lit up the sky later that evening, Ethan leaned against Sarah, resting his head on her shoulder. "I'm glad I'm home," he murmured, his voice soft but steady. Sarah kissed the top of his head, holding him close. "Me too, sweetheart," she replied. "Me too." In that moment, surrounded by love and laughter, Sarah realized that their family wasn't just surviving, they were thriving. And though scars remained, they served as reminders of the strength it took to endure and triumph over adversity. Life would never be perfect, but for now, it was enough. As the months passed, Ethan's transformation continued to astonish everyone who knew him. What had started as a fragile reunion between mother and son blossomed into a remarkable journey of healing and growth. Ethan was no longer the timid, traumatized boy who had first stepped out of the woods. He was slowly reclaiming pieces of his childhood, rediscovering laughter, curiosity, and confidence. For Sarah, watching this change unfold was both heartwarming and humbling. It reminded her that even in the darkest moments there is always light waiting to break through. One of the most significant milestones came when Ethan decided he wanted to share his story with others. At first, the idea terrified him. Talking about his time in the woods meant revisiting painful memories he wasn't sure he was ready to confront publicly. But after several therapy sessions with Dr. Simmons, Ethan began to see his experience differently. He realized that sharing his story could inspire others facing challenges of their own. "If I can survive 2 years alone in the woods," he told Sarah one evening, "maybe someone else will feel brave enough to keep going too." Sarah supported Ethan's decision wholeheartedly, though she made it clear that he didn't have to do anything he wasn't comfortable with. Together they worked with Dr. Simmons to prepare for interviews and public appearances. They practiced answering questions, focusing on positive aspects of Ethan's survival, rather than dwelling on the hardships. Slowly but surely, Ethan gained confidence, learning how to articulate his emotions without feeling overwhelmed by them. The first opportunity came when a local news station invited Ethan and Sarah to appear on a morning talk show. The segment was titled, "Against All Odds, A Story of Survival and Hope." As cameras rolled and studio lights shone brightly, Ethan sat beside his mother, gripping her hand tightly. When the host asked him to describe his experience, Ethan took a deep breath before speaking. His voice trembled at first, but as he spoke, it grew steadier. He talked about finding food and water, building shelter, and relying on animals for companionship. He described nights spent staring at the stars, wondering if anyone was looking for him. And finally, he shared how he never gave up hope that Sarah would find him someday. By the end of the interview, tears filled not only Ethan and Sarah's eyes, but also those of the audience and crew members. The response was overwhelming. Viewers flooded social media with messages of support, calling Ethan a hero and praising Sarah's unwavering determination. Local schools invited Ethan to speak to students about resilience and perseverance. Community groups organized fundraisers in his honor, raising money for organizations dedicated to helping missing children and their families. Suddenly, Ethan wasn't just a survivor, he was a symbol of hope for countless people across the country. Despite the newfound attention, Sarah and Ethan remained grounded. They understood that fame wasn't what mattered. What truly mattered was using their platform to make a difference. Inspired by Ethan's growing influence, Sarah launched a foundation called Ethan's Path, aimed at providing resources and support for families of missing children. The organization offered counseling services, educational workshops, and financial assistance to help cover search expenses. It also partnered with law enforcement agencies to improve strategies for locating missing persons. Through Ethan's, Sarah hoped to prevent other families from enduring the same agony she had faced. Meanwhile, Ethan embraced his role as an advocate while continuing to rebuild his life. He returned to school full-time, excelling in subjects like art and science. Teachers often remarked on his creativity and problem-solving skills, qualities honed during his time in the wilderness. Outside of academics, Ethan joined a soccer team, discovering a love for the sport that surprised even himself. Playing alongside teammates taught him the value of teamwork and trust, lessons that extended beyond the field and into his personal relationships. At home, Sarah noticed subtle changes in Ethan's behavior. He laughed more freely now, his giggles echoing through the house during family game nights. He became curious about technology, spending hours tinkering with gadgets or exploring apps on Sarah's tablet. One day, he proudly showed her a app he'd been studying, pointing out routes and landmarks with enthusiasm. "I don't want anyone else to get lost," he explained earnestly. Sarah hugged him tightly, marveling at his desire to turn pain into purpose. Though progress was undeniable, there were still moments when the weight of Ethan's past caught up with him. Certain triggers, a loud noise, a sudden movement, or even the sight of dense woods could send him spiraling back into anxiety. During these episodes, Sarah stayed calm, reminding Ethan to breathe and reassuring him that he was safe. Over time, he learned coping mechanisms, such as counting backward from 10 or squeezing a stress ball, to manage his reactions. Therapy remained a crucial part of his routine, offering a safe space to process lingering fears. One particularly poignant moment occurred during a family trip to the park. As Ethan played on the swings, a group of children approached him, asking why he looked so different from everyone else. Instead of shrinking away, Ethan smiled and said, "Because I lived in the woods for a long time. Want to hear about it?" To Sarah's amazement, the kids gathered around eagerly, listening intently as Ethan recounted tales of survival. Their fascination turned into admiration, and soon they were asking him questions about everything from building shelters to befriending wild animals. Watching her son command attention with such poise brought tears to Sarah's eyes. As Ethan's 11th birthday approached, Sarah planned a special celebration to mark not only another year of life but also a year since his rescue. This time, instead of limiting the guest list to close friends and family, they opened the event to the entire community. Hundreds of people attended, filling the town square with laughter, music, and joy. Booths were set up featuring games, crafts, and information about Ethan's path. Local businesses donated food, prizes, and decorations, turning the occasion into a festival of gratitude and unity. During the ceremony, Sarah stood before the crowd, holding Ethan's hand tightly. Her voice wavered as she thanked everyone for their support over the past 3 years. Then, turning to Ethan, she said, "You've shown us all what true strength looks like. You've taught us to never give up, no matter how hard things get. Today we celebrate not just your birthday, but your courage, your kindness, and your incredible spirit." The audience erupted into applause, cheering loudly as Ethan grinned shyly, waving to the crowd. Later that evening, as fireworks lit up the sky, Ethan pulled Sarah aside. "Mom," he whispered, "do you think Dad would be proud of me?" Sarah froze, her heart aching at the mention of Ethan's father, who had passed away shortly before Ethan's disappearance. She knelt down, meeting her son's gaze. "Your Dad loved you more than anything in the world," she replied softly. "And yes, he would be so proud of you. Just like I am." Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine his father's presence, not as a source of sadness, but as a guiding force watching over him. That realization brought a sense of peace neither Sarah nor Ethan had felt before. They weren't just moving forward. They were carrying the love of those they had lost along with them. In the weeks that followed, Ethan continued to thrive, embracing new opportunities and challenges with courage. He began volunteering at animal shelters, inspired by the creatures that had kept him company in the woods. He wrote letters to other children who had gone missing, offering words of encouragement and hope. And he dreamed big, imagining a future where he could travel the world, sharing his story and making a difference wherever he went. For Sarah, seeing Ethan's dreams take shape filled her with pride and purpose. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would still be bumps and hurdles to overcome. But she trusted that together, they could face anything. Their bond had grown stronger through adversity, forged in the fires of loss and resilience. Now standing side by side, they were ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As autumn leaves began to fall, painting the streets of Maplewood in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah reflected on how far they had come. From the depths of despair to the heights of triumph, their journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. Though scars remained, they served as reminders of the battles fought and won. Life would never be perfect, but perfection wasn't the goal. It was connection, love, and hope that truly mattered. And for Sarah and Ethan, those were gifts they cherished every single day. 2 years after Ethan's rescue, life in Maplewood had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What had once been a quiet town known for its picturesque streets and friendly neighbors was now a beacon of hope and resilience, thanks to the extraordinary story of Sarah Miller and her son. Ethan's survival against all odds had touched hearts across the nation, inspiring countless people to believe in the power of perseverance and love. For Sarah, this newfound attention wasn't just about fame. It was an opportunity to create lasting change. Through Ethan's path, the foundation she had founded, she worked tirelessly to ensure that no family would ever endure the pain and uncertainty she had faced. The impact of Ethan's story extended far beyond Maplewood. Schools across the country incorporated his tale into their curriculums, teaching students about survival skills, mental strength, and the importance of community support. Teachers often invited Ethan to speak via video calls, where he shared insights from his journey with classrooms full of eager listeners. His message was always the same. Even when things seem impossible, don't give up. Help is out there, and you are stronger than you think. These words resonated deeply, not only with children, but also with adults who found themselves facing their own challenges. At home, Ethan continued to grow into a remarkable young boy. Now 11 years old, he radiated confidence and kindness, traits that endeared him to everyone he met. He excelled in school, particularly in subjects like science and art, which allowed him to explore his creativity and curiosity. His artwork, inspired by the animals and landscapes he encountered during his time in the woods, won awards at local exhibitions. One painting, titled "Home Under the Stars," depicted the makeshift shelter surrounded by glowing constellations. It became a symbol of hope, reminding viewers that even in the darkest nights, light can still shine through. Sarah marveled at how much Ethan had changed since the day they were reunited. The fearful, fragile child who clung to her for safety had blossomed into a compassionate and determined individual. Yet despite his progress, Sarah knew that healing was an ongoing process. Some days, Ethan still struggled with anxiety or vivid memories of his time alone. But instead of letting these moments define him, he leaned on the tools he'd learned in therapy: deep breathing exercises, journaling, and talking openly with trusted loved ones. Sarah remained his steadfast anchor, always ready to listen and comfort whenever he needed her. One of the most meaningful developments in Ethan's life came when he decided to write a book about his experiences. With Sarah's encouragement, he collaborated with a local author to turn his story into a memoir titled "Through the Trees: A Boy's Journey Home." Writing the book was both cathartic and challenging for Ethan. Reliving certain moments brought tears to his eyes, but it also gave him closure. By putting his thoughts into words, he reclaimed ownership of his narrative, transforming pain into purpose. When the book was published, it quickly became a bestseller, earning praise from critics and readers alike. The success of Through the Trees opened doors for Ethan to share his story on a larger scale. He appeared on national television shows, participated in panel discussions, and delivered keynote speeches at conferences focused on child welfare and resilience. Each appearance reinforced his mission to inspire others while raising awareness about issues affecting missing children. Sarah accompanied him to every event, beaming with pride as she watched her son command stages with poise and authenticity. Together, they proved that even the smallest voices could spark monumental change. As Ethan's influence grew, so did the reach of Ethan's Path. The foundation expanded its programs, offering free counseling services to families of missing children, organizing search and rescue training workshops, and funding research into innovative technologies for locating missing persons. One groundbreaking initiative involved partnering with tech companies to develop advanced mapping tools similar to the Google Maps feature that had led Sarah to Ethan's trail. These tools allowed users to identify hidden paths and remote areas, making searches more efficient and effective. Thousands of volunteers joined the cause, forming networks dedicated to supporting families in crisis. Back in Maplewood, the community rallied around Sarah and Ethan, celebrating their achievements and continuing to honor Ethan's legacy. Every October, on the anniversary of his rescue, the town hosted Ethan's Day, a festival filled with activities, performances, and fundraisers. Proceeds went directly to Ethan's Path, ensuring the foundation's sustainability. The event drew visitors from neighboring towns and cities, turning it into a regional celebration of hope and unity. For Sarah and Ethan, it was a chance to reconnect with those who had supported them throughout their journey and express gratitude for the love and kindness they had received. Despite the accolades and recognition, Sarah and Ethan never lost sight of what truly mattered: their bond as mother and son. They cherished quiet evenings at home, cooking meals together, watching movies, and sharing stories about their day. On weekends, they explored new places, visiting parks, museums, and hiking trails. These adventures weren't just about having fun. They were opportunities for Ethan to reclaim parts of his childhood and build memories untainted by fear or loss. One autumn afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the woods behind their house, Sarah stopped near a familiar tree. Carved into its bark were initials, EM, a reminder of the day Ethan returned home. She smiled softly, running her fingers over the letters. "Do you remember this?" she asked, glancing at Ethan. He nodded, grinning. "How could I forget? This is where I promised myself I'd never stop believing you'd find me." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she hugged him tightly. "And I promised myself I'd never stop looking," she whispered. "We kept our promises, didn't we?" Ethan nodded again, his voice firm. "Yeah, we did. And now we're stronger because of it." That moment encapsulated everything they had overcome together. Their journey hadn't been easy. In fact, it had tested them in ways they never imagined, but it had also taught them invaluable lessons about love, resilience, and the human spirit's capacity to endure. As they stood beneath the golden canopy of leaves bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, Sarah realized something profound. Their story wasn't just about survival. It was about finding beauty in brokenness, strength in vulnerability, and hope in the face of despair. In the years that followed, Ethan continued to dream big. He aspired to become a writer, environmentalist, and advocate for children's rights, using his platform to amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. Sarah supported him every step of the way, knowing that the future held endless possibilities for her extraordinary son. Together they embraced each new chapter with courage and optimism, guided by the belief that even the hardest journeys can lead to the brightest destinations. For Sarah, the scars of the past would always remain. A faint ache in her chest whenever she thought about the 2 years Ethan was missing. But those scars were also reminders of the battles they had fought and won. They served as testaments to the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child, forged not in spite of adversity, but because of it. And though life would never be without challenges, Sarah knew one thing for certain. As long as she had Ethan by her side, she could face anything. As winter approached, blanketing Maplewood in a soft layer of snow, Sarah sat by the window, sipping hot cocoa and watching Ethan play outside with his friends. Laughter echoed through the crisp air, mingling with the sound of sleds sliding down hills. For the first time in years, Sarah felt at peace. Her heart was whole again, filled not with grief but with gratitude, for the miracle of reunion, for the strength they had discovered within themselves, and for the promise of brighter days ahead. Life may not have turned out exactly as they had planned, but it was richer, deeper, and infinitely more meaningful because of the struggles they had endured. Sarah and Ethan's story was proof that, even in the darkest forests, paths could be found, and that sometimes the hardest journeys lead us back to where we belong.